Welcome back to From Middle Class to Millions. It is October. We are in the final quarter of 2025. That means we are rounding out the year. This is it. We are just coming to the bitter end of 2025, and it's been quite a wild year. And I think if you haven't decided what you want the year to look like, it's not too late. There's still a lot that you can do in 3 months. I always think that the fall is a great time to finish out the year strong. And you can do that. You can definitely do that. You just have to get really intentional about what's important to you. The other day I was listening to this young woman on TikTok, and she was talking about the 4 phases of winter. Now, this hits home particularly for those of us who live in the Northeast or anywhere where you really and truly have 4 seasons. And when you experience the harsh winters that we experience, And so she brought up this whole breakdown of the 4 phases of winter and how between the end of September till daylight savings, you should lock in. You should really lock in on the habits, on the things that you really want to do, getting your dopamine hits, figuring out what provides you with dopamine. Really lock in during this time. And I think she said there were like 39 days between September 26th, I think it was, and November 3rd, where you could lock in and make a real difference in terms of building your habits and getting yourself set up for the next 3 phases of winter. I'm not going to break down all of the phases, but I thought it was really an intentional way of preparing for the really tough time that we experience in the wintertime. Right? Preparing for the the short days, the darkness, waking up in the dark, going to work in the dark, coming home in the dark. It's always dark. And then the temperature starts to drop and it gets colder and colder. And you just start to hibernate, right? Unconsciously. She's saying that we need to hibernate consciously. And we need to be intentional about what we're going to do during these dark months. Because if you're like me at all, I get really down, like seasonal affective disorder. I don't know if I could say that I've ever been diagnosed with it, but I know that the winter for me sucks. Okay. I don't like it. I don't feel great. So I have to be really conscious about getting outside, getting some fresh air, getting some vitamin D, making sure that I still go for walks, going out in that frigid tundra, even though it doesn't feel even remotely appealing. So I like the idea of the intentionality. I like that I'm going to this year, and I don't know why it took me this long to figure out, hey, why don't you plan for the winter? That I'm actually going to be intentional. And I've shared it with like everybody who's close to me who's been affected by the weather and knows what's coming once fall hits. And as beautiful as fall is and as lovely as the weather has been, we know what is coming. So I shared it with a lot of people, and I think it can just apply to every aspect of your life, like being intentional about so many things. And this is an opportunity for you to be intentional about your money as we're closing out the year as well. This is a time when I make sure that things that I started in January and I set up in January, I check in to see how they're going. And then if there's anything else that's outstanding, I want to do that before the end of the year. So for folks like you who are working towards putting money into your IRAs, putting money into your 401ks, particularly your 401k, because the deadline is December 31st of 2025, right? So you have until the end of the year to put in as much money in your 401k as possible, but that's driven by your paychecks. So if you want to run over to your 401k HR, the brokerage house, whomever the administrator is for your 401k, and find out if it's possible for you to turn up the heat a little bit on that 401k. Contribute a little bit more right now. Get it up a little bit higher, even if you turn that up 1 extra percent, right? To drive that up at the end of the year and not just go out in cruise control, but to actually be intentional. The same thing goes for your HSA. If you can turn up the volume on that, if you can maximize that, if you didn't do that at the top of the year, I know not everybody is in a position right now that in January to like max out their IRA, max out their HSA and like start doing the maximum contribution to hit the max for their 401k at the beginning of the year. So If that's not possible for you, then this is a time when you can still do something that can make a difference, right? That can actually move the needle. And so I don't want you to just give up now because it's the end of the year's over. No, this is the time when you still can make some intentional changes and differences, right, to your finances. All right, so start prepping for the winter. I know it sounds like, what? We're still wearing shorts, but believe you me, it'll be here sooner than you think, just like anything else. If you can plan for it, then you're going to feel a lot better. And I know I'm telling you this because this is the only way that me, a procrastinator, can actually ensure that things get done, is that I make appointments. I make a commitment with someone else, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's somebody who is really good at what I want to do better in. And I sit with them and ensure that I get the things done. Because if I'm left to my own devices, it just doesn't happen. All right. I want to give you guys kind of a cautionary tale, because I've heard a podcast about Chalene Johnson and Bret Johnson. And I know you may know of these guys. They're pretty famous on Instagram, but they have a history of being in the fitness industry and were pretty influential in the fitness industry, probably, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s. They did a lot of like fitness videos. Chalene is very much the woman who is doing those types of health and wellness stuff now. And she's also pretty Instagram famous. She's really good for selling Instagram, even with Instagram strategies, even with her son, Brock Johnson. So, if you are even aware of these guys, I want to highlight the podcast that Chalene had, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And it was a 2-part series where she talked about how they were scammed by their financial advisor. And the reason why I'm bringing this to you and to my audience in particular is because you guys may not quite be at the stage where you have a financial advisor. Some of you do. Some of you do. And I just want to raise awareness, okay? Because I am not in any way, shape, or form saying all financial advisors are shady, that they're going to take off and abscond with your money, that you can't trust them. That's not the case at all. But I want to highlight that this couple, okay, was ripe for this particular financial advisor simply because they said they went to him because they didn't believe that they were good with money. Okay? They had been in debt before. They had money issues before. They were just, constantly struggling with money. And then at one point, their business was doing really well. And they were like, we don't want to mess this up this time. We don't want to mess up this opportunity. Our business is doing well, even though it's done well in the past. It's doing well, and we want to do the right thing with our money. We don't want to make any mistakes. We don't want to have a future of this constant up and down and struggle. And so, like most people, when they hear, okay, well, what should you do with your money? They tend to go to a financial coach. People told them go to a financial coach. And so they decided to work with this particular guy that they found who was linked to Merrill Lynch. Now, again, this is a unique situation with this particular individual. It is not necessarily a stain on Merrill Lynch. This probably could have happened anywhere because he actually transitioned to another company, a smaller brokerage firm, but and he was doing the same thing, right? So he could have been doing this at Fidelity. He could have been doing this at Charles Schwab. He could have been doing this at Vanguard. Like, this is the thing. This is specific to this individual. But they had decided that they wanted to go to a bigger brokerage house like Merrill Lynch because they had had a family member who had given their money to, some rando financial advisor at another brokerage, maybe a smaller company that wasn't as well known. And this person had lost their money. So they were safeguarding themselves, at least they thought. They were safeguarding themselves against something like this happening because they're like, hey, if we go with a notable organization, one that, is responsible for all the checks and balances, there's mitigating the likelihood that this would happen to them, that they would lose their money like this family member had in the past. And I want to point out that I have had clients come to me who had a financial advisor. I have one particular client in mind where she had gotten an inheritance. She said it was a small inheritance from her grandmother, but her grandmother had left money for her and her sister and upwards of $10,000. And she gave this money to a financial advisor. Now, my client was very clear. I didn't understand anything about money. I didn't understand anything about investing. I handed it over to this woman who was a financial advisor. I trusted her. And guess what? The money was all gone. And what did my client do? My client stayed out of the market for the next decade because she was just terrified. The PTSD from putting not only her money, but the money her grandmother had worked so hard for and left for her, she just felt really ashamed. She felt embarrassed. She felt like, the stock market truly is a gamble. And, she just felt like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I know people put money in there and it works for them, but clearly it didn't work for me. And I don't trust financial advisors. So when she came to work with me and I was like, hey, why aren't you investing? What's going on? We got to get your money into your 401k. Like, you're losing all the benefits of investing in your 401k. You're losing the tax shelter. You're losing the fact that it will grow over time. You're losing the fact that this is going to be your retirement money when you decide to either pivot or stop working altogether. And she had told me the story, which made complete and perfect sense why she'd stayed out of the market. And she started investing because I taught her what it is that she should be looking for, what her money is doing, where she's investing, why she should invest in certain things. There was no benefit to me when she decided to invest in this type of equity versus that type of equity because I wasn't getting a kickback. But you see, with her financial advisor was just putting her money into whatever because she was getting her fee regardless. And anytime she put her money into high cost funds, the advisor was getting money on top of that as well. So as you could see, there was no incentive for the advisor really to care, especially if they were even remotely nefarious. And because my client didn't know what to ask for, didn't know how her money was performing, didn't even understand truly what her money was in, it was easy for her to slip under the radar. The same reason that she gave her money, my client gave her money to the financial advisor, is the same reason why Bret and Chalene gave their money to a financial advisor. They didn't trust themselves with money. They didn't understand money. They didn't understand how the market worked. So they were like, okay, here, let me hand it to you and you take it. And, I'm going to trust because you're with Merrill Lynch, you're going to do the right thing by me. You're going to do the right thing and take care of my money and make it grow. So for years, Bret and Chalene was working with this guy. And I will tell you, what's really fascinating about this is that Bret then decided, you know what? I'm going to learn about money. I'm going to learn about the market. I'm going to study this. I'm going to become educated. I'm going to become financially literate. I am going to make sure that I understand what's going on so I understand what the advisor is doing so that I can have conversations with the advisor. And when they talk about this, they talk about the fact that Bret and the advisor used to talk all the time because as Bret was learning, he was asking questions. As Bret was learning, he was sharing this stuff with the advisor, and the advisor thought it was great because guess what? Most of these financial advisors don't talk to their clients, right? They are not obligated to understand or make sure that you understand what you're investing in. If at best, you will hear from them, it's probably once a year. Many of the time, it's because you're a small fish in this humongous pond. And although, yes, your money is important to you and you worked hard for your money, that money that you're putting in there is minuscule compared to their really big clients. right? So they don't have time to make all these calls to these folks who are making, talking about their 50,000, 100,000 or whatever. This guy was working with no, not ultra, maybe high net worth clients. And he agreed to take these guys on because, hey, he wanted to. And he thought, all right, I'll work with them. You know what I mean? It's not usually the clientele that he works with because he works with much bigger fish. Apparently, that's what he said. And so he was not necessarily going to take them on. So I think that also was a part of why they went with him, because they felt like they were getting this special treatment, like he was doing them a favor. I'm used to taking these high net worth or ultra high net worth clients, but okay, I'll take you guys on. So over time, they had worked with this guy. I want to point out I think they said somewhere upwards of 13 or 16 years. So bear in mind, this isn't like, oh, I gave you my money 3 months later, you disappeared with all of my money. No, they had a long-standing relationship with this guy. So much so that over time, he had built their portfolio to 8 figures. Okay. They had an 8-figure portfolio. Now imagine you're someone who said, you'd been in debt so much, you weren't good at managing your money, you're always stressed about money. You were a high earner, you could earn money, but the keeping of money and the managing of money and the growth and the preservation, not your forte. So imagine you come to this guy and over time you see that your portfolio is growing and it's growing exponentially and it's doing incredibly well. And you are thrilled. He's thrilled. Everybody's thrilled. And the people around you know that you are doing well as well, because you talk about it. You talk about investments. Like Bret was really into it. I even remember seeing Bret on Instagram a few years back, talking about investing a lot, right? He doesn't talk about it as much anymore. Well, he stopped somewhere in between there, but he used to talk about it a lot. And that, of course, that's content that I'm going to follow because I was like, oh, I love this stuff, right? This is like, I like to geek out on that. And then, so he was learning about it. And when you're learning something, you're all in, right? And you're sharing it with everybody. You're like, you can't believe it. Like, this is how you manage money. And remember, he's also learning how to manage his money. And this guy is helping them grow this portfolio. This guy is helping them get loans for their business at incredible rates that you and I, the average person, can't get unless you know how to do so. And you're able to borrow against your portfolio, right? You're able to borrow against your investments. So you're not putting out a lot of cash. What's happening is you're able to leverage this money. And that's what he was able to do with them. So imagine the trust that he built up. Imagine the trust that they had in him. This is the guy they said that was sending, both of their kids are grown and they're married. And when they got married, he was sending them presents, the whole 9. It was like he was like a kind of extended part of the family. And so when people heard about the success that they had with him, and if people were talking about, well, we need a financial advisor, we're not quite sure what to do with money. And this, I tell you, is part of the problem with society, is that the reason why people don't know what to do with money is because we don't talk about it enough. It is behind the curtain. It is a secret. And for Bret and Chalene, who were doing well, they were talking about their advisor. They didn't promote him. But if anybody asked, hey, do you have an advisor? They were like, okay, well, we work with this guy. There are no promises. I don't know if he's taking on new clients. I don't know, if it'll be a good fit. But by all means, you can go and talk to them, because you should interview your financial advisor, right? It's not just, oh, do you like them? But it's, do they like you? Do you think you can work together? Do you have the similar philosophies? Do they understand your philosophy? Or are they just plugging numbers into a financial software system that just spits out what you should do and what'll work for you by the time you're X age, right? This is not a one size fits all. It is not, but it is often treated that way. right? And so they would say to folks, look, if you want to, no promises, but you can go talk to him. We're really happy with him. We've been with him for X number of years, and it's really worked out for us. And, we've done a lot of things. And so the last thing that they talked about with him, which was the last, I think, big investment that they did with him, was a private equity investment. So I don't know what the exact breakdown is of their portfolio, of course, but a lot of their money was in the public markets, like the stock market. But then they also had money in private equity. Now, we all know private equity is riskier. There's no question about it, right? It's a riskier investment. But when you have an 8-figure portfolio, you may want to start taking some greater risks because you have access to a lot of these investments that somebody who doesn't have $1 million or $10 million or $5 million, I should say, has access to. So these guys were able to invest in things that you and I may not be able to invest in, right? When I started out, the investments that I see nowadays that I can invest in, I couldn't invest in back then. I was not a qualified purchaser. I was not a qualified investor. You have to have a certain amount of money or make a certain amount of money or have a certain net worth in order to be permitted to even invest in these things. Well, of course, these guys were, because over the years, their portfolio had grown. And so they were investing in this private equity investment. Don't know the details of it. Doesn't matter. The point is, they decided to invest in it because their advisor had told them about it. And he said, this would be perfect for you guys. Now, a lot of the times with private equity, your money is locked up for a while. And so for this particular investment, they had put $300,000 in, and it was supposed to be locked up for 12 years. And I don't know what the anticipated rate of return was going to be, right? But imagine your money's locked up for 12 years, okay? So they had money. Like I don't know how many of you can fathom putting $300,000 away, not seeing it for 12 years, and hoping, right, that you were going to get a return on that investment, right? And so that's the amount of money they were playing with. But if you can just bring it down to scale, okay, bring it down to scale. And I said to you, look, you're going to put $300 away for 12 years. But hey, at the end of the 12 years, that 300 could potentially be, let's just say, you're going to 10x your money. It's going to be 3,000, right? Like, I don't know, whatever, 30,000, whatever the case may be. And so that's the idea behind this private equity investment that they were investing in. Now, in the meantime, they, like I said, are sharing with friends, extended friends, friends of friends, anybody who asked, okay, yes, this is who we work with. Because when people get a little bit of money, they want to know, hey, I don't want to do the wrong thing. I want to talk to somebody that I trust who can help us with money. So they had 2 scenarios where they shared with good friends, and they talked to the financial advisor and said to the financial advisor, hey, would you mind working with our friends? They're friends of ours. They're in a very interesting situation. We trust you, and we want to make sure that they're in good hands. So one of the friends, they had, some financial struggles, but finally they were at a point where they had worked hard and gotten themselves out of that situation. And they were now at the stage in their life when they decided they were going to sell their house. Well, they're one of the folks, they're located in Southern California. They're one of the folks who kind of won the real estate lottery. And the real estate lottery is folks who bought their homes ages ago for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and now their homes are worth well into the millions, right? And it's just because that's what happened with the market. The market blew up. They were in a certain area, location, and here they are sitting on a ton of money. So they decided they were going to sell their house. And when they sold the house, they were going to take that money and now they were going to invest it with this particular financial advisor. This particular financial advisor said, yes, I will. Bret and Chalene's financial advisor, yes, I will take them on as clients. Again, they're not usually my ultra high net worth clients, but I will take them on as a favor to you. Great. They had a second friend. She was a single mom. Apparently, she had gotten into some kind of accident and she had received a settlement. And the settlement was for a ton of money. I don't believe Chalene talked about how much it was for, but it was for a lot of money. And this is a single mom who could no longer work due to the accident. And so she was really nervous about making the right decision with her money, because this is money that would have to sustain her and her children for the rest of her life. So knowing that you've gotten this lump sum of money, you can't work, right, doing what you were doing before, you really want to be certain that this money is going to provide you with income, not only now, but in the future, right? It's going to be able to have you take care of yourself, take care of your children, take care of yourself in the future and your children in the future, do all of the things. And so she went to Bret and Chalene and said, hey, who do you guys work with? Would, this person mind working with me and helping me make the right decisions with my money? I know you've worked with him for years. You trust him, blah, blah, blah. So Bret and Chalene went and talked to this guy and said, hey, this is someone very close to us. She's in this particular position. Would you work with her? Absolutely. Now, there are a couple of other people that weren't as close to them that also went to work with this guy, but everybody started to notice some red flags. And I want you to jump over and listen to the podcast or watch the podcast, because it's really fascinating. They all began to notice the red flags. But one of the things that he did is he used his social capital with Bret and Chalene to scam all of their friends out of their money. So when he had said to them initially, hey, why don't you invest in this private equity deal for $300,000? Okay. It's going to be tied up for 12 years and you're going to get the rate of return. That was that. That's what he did with Bret and Chalene. But what he did with their friends is slightly different. He would ask them to constantly make contributions to this private equity fund. So it wasn't just, put X amount of money in the beginning. He would say, every year or every quarter or whatever the case may be, you have to continue contributing to this fund. So they were transferring the money out of one place and contributing it to this private equity fund. And when they would question, well, why do we have to keep putting money in? And why should we continue doing this? He would become irate. He would say, well, Bret and Chalene are doing it. And, they're not giving any problems. They don't, look, if you don't want to do it, you could take your money. He was essentially bullying them into continuing to put their money into this private equity fund and using Chalene and Bret's name as like they're doing it. You trust them. They trust me. What is the problem? Making these guys second guess themselves as he gaslit them, right? And so this was going on for a while, but nobody had said anything to Bret and Chalene, which I think is interesting because, again, they probably felt badly. These people probably were like, we don't know anything about money. If the Bret and Chalene are doing it and they trust him and they know him, who am I to second guess him? Who am I to question him? And I don't know enough about these things, because that's how we talk about money, these things, these investments. And so what am I going to even ask? How am I going to check? How am I going to double check if this makes sense or not? Right? And so because we don't talk about money enough, these kind of things can go undetected for years. Now, you can go listen to the podcast to find out how they uncovered all this and what's happening in the meantime, and if Bret or Chalene and their friends are even going to get their money back or what's going to happen. But I can assure you that Chalene is going after this and it's going to fight it tooth and nail, because if you know anything about her, she's had certain cases, not financial, but other cases like this, instances where somebody is cheating someone, is unjust, is just not doing the right thing. And she really is all about the justice. So she will put all of her energy and effort and time into the truth coming to light and that person being held accountable for what they've done. So I'm sure there will be more to this story. And I think it's important for you to jump over to the Chalene show and listen, because this could happen to anyone. And I want you to pay particular attention to how I told you this story. I do not think for 1 second that Chalene and Bret did anything wrong. I think that this is completely the fault of that financial advisor. I think that he preyed on those two and, of course, all of their friends. I think that the mere fact that you have to put your trust in these individuals is leaving you obviously susceptible to finding a bad egg, right? But the only thing that stood out to me, and it's not their fault, but it is a characteristic of people that come to me, that work with me, and I'm glad that they do, tell me that they don't understand money. They don't believe they're good at it. They don't understand the money management. They don't understand investing. They are oftentimes, like I said, the first generation high earner. They may be the first generation American. They may be the first generation college graduate. They may be the first to even hear these words, understand the notion of investing and building wealth. These are the folks that are on their way to becoming millionaires. But they don't know whom to turn to, where to turn, what to do in order to create this money and this wealth. And so these guys are the ones that are scared and intimidated and do not want to make a mistake, because the level of responsibility that they have with this money is unbelievable. They don't want to make a mistake with it. And so they're putting their faith in someone and turning around and saying, please take care of this for me. I don't want to deal with it. And it is often that individual that is unfortunately taken advantage of. And even though along the way, Bret was learning all that he could about money, if you are in a position with someone who you believe, right? You know they're the expert in this field, but you believe that whatever they say should override your gut feeling, override your intuition. That is where the problem lies. It is not that, oh, how could they give him that much money? Why were they not checking? Why weren't they reading all the financials? None of you are going to read every single prospectus. None of you are going to go through your statements with a fine-tooth comb. None of you are going to do that. Let's be honest. But if you believe that this person is so brilliant and so smart and knows way more than you, and you can barely add, and you don't understand any of that goobly goop that's going on Wall Street and blah, 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 and that feeling that they are mightier than thou and know more than you, you let that feeling and that belief override your intuition, that feeling you get in your gut, that's like, this doesn't feel right. I smell a rat. If you let your belief that they are so brilliant and know so much more than you, that is when you become rife for being taken advantage of. It is at that moment. And so I want all of you, when you were thinking about your 401k, if you have a 401k, you are an investor. You may not be working with someone, right, to manage that 401k for you, but there is someone behind the scenes that you are paying fees to. You need to think about, what are they doing with my money? What am I doing with my money? What is my money invested in? Where is my money going to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years? You have to make it a point to be attuned to what's going on and understand, particularly if you're working with someone else, understand what they're doing and let them talk to you. And if they don't have time to talk to you, you don't have time to give them your money. Hands down. If they don't have time to talk to you, Do not let them manage your money. You worked hard for it. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. And if they're managing your money, let them explain it to you. Let them explain what they're doing. Let them make it become crystal clear to you, because it isn't that complicated. Now, if they want to make it complicated, by all means they can. And if that's the person you're working with, again, get out of there. That's not who you should be working with. Find someone who can explain it to you, who will take the time to answer your questions, who understands what you want, understands the goals that you're trying to achieve and accomplish. That's the person you should be working with, if anyone. All right? If anyone. Because many of you are entirely capable of doing this on your own. And it's not until you may need to check in, once a year, or when it's time to start drawing down on the money, or there's a life event, a major life event, that you would go and work with someone who's not tied to any of the funds that you're working with, right? Who doesn't have any reason for you to invest in A, B, or C because, they're getting kickbacks, right? It's not until you have those life events or you're about to draw down on that money do you need to work with someone. I would much rather you get a wealth plan for yourself that you've intentionally crafted with a coach, that you have decided that this is the direction that I'm going in and that I want to go in, and this is how long it's going to take me to get there. I would much rather you do that and become financially literate than go and sit with an advisor and give your money and your fees and, that one-off time to not understand what's going on with your money. I would much rather you change your thinking about how you manage money before you give your money to a financial advisor. Because it's that thinking that allows you to override the feeling in your gut, that pit in the stomach that you feel when something doesn't seem right. Now, again, I'm not saying that every financial advisor is a crook. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying Merrill Lynch is the worst, and if you have your money in there, get it the hell out of there. I'm not saying that either. I'm saying I want you, as the high earner that you are, I want you as the high earner who's not rich yet, to really lock in to understanding what is going on with your money. At the beginning of this podcast, I talked about it's October. There's still a lot that can be done in 2025. We've still got 3 months, and there's absolutely no reason for you to throw in the towel. There's no reason at all. And for those of you who currently have money with a financial advisor, whom I know you haven't spoken to, and I know who doesn't have the time of day for you, and I know can't really explain the fees to you because they tell you, there are no fees and da-da-da-da. Come back to me. Come back to me after you've listened to this and tried to get in touch with them and tell me what you're going to do to change this situation so that you have a better grasp and more control in your money, so that you don't end up like my former client did. You don't end up like Chalene and Bret did, that you can do everything in your power to avoid what happened to these guys. And again, Chalene and Bret are going to be okay because I think he really, and I say only in quotes, absconded with that $300,000. Which nobody likes to lose any money. No one likes to feel taken advantage of. No one likes to feel betrayed. But in the grand scheme of things, these guys made out okay because remember, they have an 8-figure portfolio. So $300,000 isn't going to break them. But for their friends who lost everything, that's a whole different story. So I want to avoid that happening to you guys. I want you to become financially literate. I want you to realize that, yes, you are in a position as a first-gen high earner that you have a lot of responsibility and that you don't want to mess any of this up, and you won't. You won't. If you take the time and become intentional about what you're doing with your money. All right, folks, that is it for today. I will be back again next week. Please do me a favor and rate this podcast and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Make sure that you take the moment to do that and share it with anybody you know that uses money. All right, take care. Bye.